Hi everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Xbox 360, a retrospective. A series where, over time, I will provide a brief look back on every physical game ever launched for the Xbox 360 from my own collection. Today, it's time for more James Bond with 007 Legends. Let's jump in. In episode 1, I talked about how well the James Bond franchise should translate to video games. And if you ever needed me to vindicate that opinion, then the concept of 007 Legends should do just that. Released to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the Bond franchise, 007 Legends draws on the series' vast catalogue of movies and pieces together iconic moments from the various Bond eras, all wrapped up in an overarching narrative written for the game. That all sounds pretty great, right? Now, add in Eurocom, a developer that has a solid history of making James Bond games. GoldenEye 007 for the Wii and GoldenEye 007 Reloaded for PS3 and Xbox 360 were both really solid games. They also did the PS2 version of Quantum of Solace, which is widely regarded as the best version of that game available. They made the rather good 007 Nightfire. They also made the very good N64 version of The World Is Not Enough. Trace them back far enough, like way back to 1991, and they made the surprisingly not bad NES version of James Bond Jr. So this is a developer that has the right pedigree to pull this kind of concept off. The game features missions from one movie from each era of Bond actors. So Goldfinger from the Sean Connery era, On Her Majesty's Secret Service from the George Lazenby era, Moonraker from the Roger Moore era, License to Kill from the Timothy Dalton era, and Die Another Day from the Pierce Brosnan era. Additionally, a mission based on Skyfall from the Daniel Craig era was added as DLC a few weeks after release, as the movie itself launched about a week after the game initially arrived. So, a proven developer, a rich source material to work from. So far, so good. Let's go over the key facts. 007 Legends, as I mentioned, was developed by Eurocom. As well as their Bond games, they got quite a track record for movie tie-in games in general. Games like G-Force, Rio, Batman Begins, Predator Concrete Jungle, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets were all made by Eurocom. The game was published by Activision, and it was to be the final game under their license agreement with MGM. In fact, it is the most recent James Bond game released as of November 2024, while we wait for Project 007 from IO Interactive. The game is a first-person shooter, developed using a modified version of Eurocom's own Engine X. 007 Legends was released in the UK on the 19th of October 2012, a week before Skyfall arrived in cinemas. The game was launched on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and PC, and a Wii U version launched a few weeks afterwards on 7th of December 2012. The Wii U version is the only version that included the Skyfall content on disc. The game garnered a Metacritic of 45. Ouch. In terms of backwards compatibility, this never happened for the Xbox One or Xbox Series consoles. In fact, the game was pulled from sale on digital stores just a few months after launching, as Activision's license with MGM either expired or got revoked. I'll let you decide. Online-wise, the servers were retired in 2019 during Activision's sunsetting of a number of legacy games and is no longer playable. However, the game does support local 4-player couch multiplayer if that's your thing, which still works fine.
No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
So, 007 Legends. Is it really as bad as that Metacritic suggests? Because a score of 45 puts it in the same bracket as things like Golden Axe, Beast Rider, Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and, dare I say it, Sonic the Hedgehog. And I have to say, it's certainly not that bad. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's great, or even particularly good, but it's certainly not quite as terrible as I feel that Metacritic suggests. But that being said, I did have some issues with 007 Legends right from the off. My first major grumble with it is the voice acting. Unlike Quantum of Solace and Bloodstone, Daniel Craig doesn't actually play Bond in 007 Legends. And while the voice portrayal by Timothy Watson is fine, it just doesn't really sound like Daniel Craig.
Of course. Fort Knox.
Who are you calling?
A friend. Felix Leiter at the CIA.
And it just immediately feels a little bit like a knockoff. Speaking of knockoffs, that kind of leads me on to my second issue with it, in that it all feels, for all intents and purposes, like a Call of Duty knockoff. Not a Modern Warfare or Black Ops Call of Duty knockoff, more like a COD 3 or a COD Big Red One knockoff. My third major gripe is the stories kind of linked together as a flashback, like a life flashing before your eyes kind of deal. Yet in all of these flashback missions, you play as Daniel Craig rather than anything resembling the other Bond portrayers, and again, it just feels off.
Over. If MI6 wants to let him go, there's nothing I can do about it. Get down!
It probably doesn't help that Bond is essentially a mass murderer in this game. The sheer amount of combat and enemies take away the feeling of it being a Bond game, and instead it feels very much like a linear and pretty generic first-person shooter. The gunplay is okay, though the left trigger aim assist seems to vary wildly in its consistency, which can get a little frustrating. While the graphics are okay and the frame rate seems to be a pretty steady 60 FPS, I couldn't help but feel the whole thing got a little bit dull pretty quickly. There's a number of Call of Duty inspired elements it feels like they tried to shoehorn in. Slow motion door breaches, the snowmobile downhill chase, mounted machine gun segments. Even enemy spawn systems are COD-like in places where infinite enemies will infinitely spawn until you move forwards to a certain pixel which magically stops them from appearing. There's even a perk system which feels very Call of Duty-like in its content, being able to use perks to reduce recoil, faster aim down sights, improve conditioning, and making yourself quieter when sneaking. The game does offer a kind of stealth alternative to all guns blazing, but I found it a somewhat frustrating affair. While you can sneak around silently and use melee, darts and silenced weapons to eliminate enemies, you can't actually interact with or move the bodies. The enemy AI varies from incredible superhuman penchant for sensing your presence from 600 meters away, right down to a level of stupidity that is almost impossible for a living being to comprehend, which is not the ideal mix when you want to play a game stealthily. In virtually every scenario, I just found myself going in loud and shooting everyone. Though there are those annoying moments where the game forces you into stealth mode by failing your mission if you are spotted. There's a few gadgets you get to play with, a smartphone to scan fingerprints, a dart gun which fires different kind of darts, and a watch that can map your surroundings and shoot a laser. The game again tries to mix up the action with simple hacking minigames and some driving sections, although if I'm honest when it comes to the driving, I'd rather they didn't. Driving controls and responsiveness is pretty poor, and it's a blessing none of these segments actually last all that long. The melee fights are a kind of weird hybrid between a quick-time event and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, using thumbsticks and triggers to direct your punches, and it all comes off a little underwhelming. But for all its faults, the generic gunplay is mostly solid. The campaign is short, it's probably 5-6 hours at best, so at least it's over quickly. There is 4-player split-screen multiplayer support, which seemed passable from the 10 minutes or so I played it for. But unless you desperately need that split-screen itch that modern online shooters somehow don't scratch for you, it's not really worth the admission price. Achievement-wise, it's pretty uninspiring. The usual single-player achievements for finishing the levels and the story and doing certain things at certain times, as well as XP, weapon and attachment upgrades and collectibles. There's also a challenge mode, which is probably going to be the most difficult to get, requiring you to perfect all the missions. There's 300 achievement points that were connected to the online multiplayer which are unobtainable now. One quick one on achievements. In the last mission, which is Moonraker, there's a section on the space station where you deactivate gravity and float around in 0G. This moment unlocks an achievement with the description, Experience 0G, which nets you a secret achievement worth, you guessed it, 0G. Pointless, literally, but a great little troll from the devs. As for its value, well, it's not going to break the bank. A quick scan on eBay recent sales and vintage listings would suggest you won't be paying any more than 8 to 10 quid tops for a really good condition, boxed and complete copy. CEX in the UK usually sell it for less than 10 quid, so it's certainly not super rare or desirable. Interestingly, the Wii U version goes for much more, though that's understandable given how little time it was on sale for, as well as including the Skyfall content on the disc. That content's long gone from the Xbox store, so the Wii U version is your best bet to get the full fat experience if you need it. So that's 007 Legends. I'm still not convinced it was quite the disaster the Metacritic score would tell you. The majority of the game is a semi-competent first-person shooter, and the multiplayer seemed like it could have some legs if you long for classic couch gaming sessions. But on the whole, I probably wouldn't recommend playing it unless you're a hardcore Bond fan, especially since Bloodstone is a better game on pretty much every level. Thanks again for watching. If you've got this far, I'd love it if you gave me a little thumbs up, but I'd appreciate it even more if you dropped a free subscription to the channel. It really helps me out to bring more of these retrospectives to you. And do let me know in the comments what you think about 007 Legends. Am I being too harsh? Am I not being harsh enough? Let me know. Until next time, be awesome to each other, and I unconditionally love your hecking faces.